Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January 23rd, 2026, and today we are talking about where the microbes go in winter, what happened when we started telling time, hint, it kind of started telling us, and it is Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Friday. I hope your week has been good. We are looking at a potentially massive snowstorm here, or maybe a snow ice storm. No one is 100% certain on how much snow or ice, maybe a foot, maybe a little ice mixed in there, maybe a lot. It's not clear yet. What is clear is that whatever we get won't go away very quickly, as it is supposed to be followed by like 8 days that never get above freezing. So all that to say, there may be some difficulties with this show next week if we lose power, or if Mike can't get here, or some combination therein, or it may be perfectly fine. Who knows? Either way, wish us luck. Kentucky is good at a lot of things, like basketball occasionally. Snowstorms are really not our strong suit, but we're up for a good challenge, so yeah. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about leeks and took on a fun, wide-ranging series of questions. On the leeks front, lots of fans of that crop out there, like myself. At George Lee wrote, quote, "I'll use the entire thing. Tops go into the dehydrator for one of the best onion green powders ever to use on omelets." End quote. Interesting. Yeah, that sounds good. Leek tops are often neglected in the kitchen, in fact, because they are fairly chewy and fibrous, so not always the best eats on their own, but you can pickle or saute them or dehydrate them like this. That sounds cool. And how we used to use them in the kitchen a lot of times was for our bouquet garni, which is just like wrapped up herbs and a green leek, and then you tie that up with like butcher's twine, and you'd throw that in soups and stocks and sauces and that sort of stuff. At Caroline Brett added that leeks get rusty, ugly, and yeah, I didn't talk about rust, but I've talked about it with garlic in the past on the show. Not an easy one, and many alliums can be susceptible. Good crop rotation is important in rust-prone regions. Make sure to space the leeks widely, or at least wider than the rest of us, as good airflow and ample sunlight will help. Definitely not an easy one to deal with, rust. Just make sure your plants get everything else they need and remove any diseased leaves when you see them. On Tuesday, we talked about wetlands, using legumes to fertilize heavy feeders and hose. Lots of good tidbits on the wetland stuff. And garden hose, like HOES, although it anagrams to HOSE, which is kind of confusing. Anyway, it's like a homonym and an anagram. How many words do that? I feel like that's not very common. Anyway, lots of good tidbits on wetlands. At Asteria wrote, quote, "Are there wetland crops that can be grown on a market garden or just personal scale? I'm thinking watercress, cranberries, maybe in a ditch off the main water route. I don't actually know, just pondering an interesting idea. Or just let the cattails go wild, put up some bird houses and set out on a rocking chair with a pair of binoculars to charge birders. Top seed in the house." Laughing while crying emoji, end quote. And yes, technically there are crops like that. And in fact, cattails themselves have several uses as well. At Bane Everything also mentioned duckweed. At Jason Branham mentioned wapato, an incredibly important wetland plant for the indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest in particular. I mean, yeah, wild rice, water chestnuts, so many valuable and unique water-loving plants live in that type of ecosystem. The challenge with wetland crops like that is mostly like food safety. Cranberries and other crops that we generally process, like grains, being the obvious exception. But also, I think it really sucks that we do have to think about stuff that way, and we do in terms of economics, and when in fact the economic value of wetlands is everything they do for the environment, and that's just a little bit harder to monetize. If you were to go back to like the wetlands managed traditionally, as many were just a few hundred years ago all over the planet, these would have like been massively abundant places, grains and grasses, fish, large herbivores and predators, eels, birds, bugs, plants, all the things. Almost every square inch would have been covered in something useful and or edible. Whether or not you could create that same thing and then commodify it, that's a little bit harder of a question, because in order to do so efficiently, to grow something, you could sell consistently, you have to control the wetlands perfectly. And once you do that, you lose much of the diversity that creates the abundance. You also rely on the outside world not putting something in the water that would make things you want to grow, like cress or like duckweed or like cranberries, toxic, or just, stealing the water for cooling their data centers, which is also not great for wetlands. Where there is a will, there is a way, though, and it would be rad if someone, were to buy a giant marshland, improve it, and demonstrate how to make a living from it, foraging for chefs and crafters, and, letting hunters and or birders come pay to explore. Anyone doing something like that would love to see it. Gets on Zillow and starts looking for wetlands for sale in Kentucky, and then also looks at the bank account. Yep. On Wednesday, we had Keenan McVeigh on to talk about Blue Goose Farm in Ontario. That was very cool. Very much enjoyed our chat. At Karen Icox wrote, quote, just what I was needing this morning, new to market gardening, but a gardening 50 plus years in SW, Australia, end quote. Lots of love for Keenan in the comments there. He had also mentioned not being too intensive about soil testing. And at the Dama Hub wrote, quote, I feel you when it comes to soil testing, etc. I'm summarizing a little bit here, but they said, I find it hard to believe that soil tests capture the complexity of influences on the soil quality adequately, end quote. And as an alternative perspective, at TYEE wrote, quote, I don't know about not paying attention to what your soil needs. If you are guessing and assuming it's healthy just by looking at it, you likely are not growing the most nutrient-dense food that you could be. If you're still having to manage pest and disease, that's the confirmation, end quote. And I think like both of those are fair perspectives, and some future episodes perhaps on how accurate soil testing actually is, and also how risky it is to not test your soil are both good topics to explore down the line. Then on Thursday, we checked in on KNF and Jadam, magnetizing irrigation and over mulching garlic. On the magnetism of water subject, at A.N. Norrist or A. Norrist wrote, quote, as much as I enjoy your podcast, I'll leave this one unwatched and a downvote. We really positively do not need to be giving any space to new age BS in farming when we otherwise are ahead in good soil and plant science compared to most large scale ag. Magnetizing water, quote unquote, and other counter scientific nonsense erodes science as a concept. It is not a matter of opinion and must not be treated as such. The correct treatment is a one sentence, no, please refer to a fourth grade physics textbooks and swiftly move on with actually relevant topics, end quote. So this person generally has like fair critiques, which is why I'll take a second to address this one fairly. I am skeptical of magnets in water myself. It's an idea that, smacks immediately of pseudoscience to me. But unlike our commenter here, I'm also a curious, sense does not make science guy who tries to stamp out my assumptions. And so I dove into the literature just to see if there was anything there. And as I said in that segment, if they had watched instead of disappointingly and needlessly berating other commenters, the science is, in fact, all over the place. Some of it clearly written by fans, but also some of it in prestigious publications like the journal Nature, demonstrating very small but measurable changes in reference to desalination in this particular study. Quoting that 2024 paper, quote, the results show that magnetized water treatment could effectively relieve and delay the occurrence time of clogging, end quote. These ideas are controversial among scientists for sure, but also there are hundreds of papers exploring the subject, descaling, desalination, all of it, far more, in fact, than basically anything we actually talk about confidently in the ag community, including widely accepted ag practices like BCSR or soil balancing, which is consistently panned by researchers as pseudoscience. Again, I'm not, endorsing magnetizing water. I'm not going to buy a magnet for my own water, but I took on the question and was frankly surprised by what I found, which was that scientists are also curious about it, which was kind of fun for me to change my view on it. To me, what erodes science as a concept, to use the commenter's phrase, is this sort of holier than thou elitism. Curiosity is way more fun, way more inviting, more infectious, easier to listen to. So feel free to be critical of my exploration of these things, but also be curious, listeners. Who knows? Maybe the science has been updated a bit since you were in fourth grade. Anyway, there was a lot of good comments on there, so I don't have time to get to them, but great stuff as always this week, Nerd Family. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we learn what the microbes have been up to this winter. BRB.
Hey nerd, this is Sean at Stump and Holler Homestead in Estacada, Oregon with the late January harvest in the tunnel here. Still lots to go. Arugula, spinach, lettuce, bok choy is hanging on. Got some carrots for later. Go Cats.
Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Bill Marshall, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. With snow piling up in 6A Western Pennsylvania, I'm focusing on what my home garden soil is doing while I wait for March. I've recently encountered cyanobacteria and what they can do to advance soil health over the winter. The actions of these organisms and their effects won't gel in my mind. You are skilled at many things, including making soil science understandable to us novice nerds. Could you discuss how cyanobacteria work in soil where it is cold for months? From what I've Googled, the potential for these bacteria to add vital minerals and etc. to crops can have major health benefits all the way up the food chain, and how they brilliantly sequester more carbon and improve soils in general. Thank you," end quote. Okay, so good stuff here. I can definitely talk about cyanobacteria. So cyanobacteria are everywhere, and they are thousands of different species in the soil. They have a range of jobs, from fixing nitrogen to stabilizing the soil. I know how I often talk about like soil aggregation or soil aggregates, those little molecular bundles of carbon wrapped in soil particles that hold water and keep the soil together. Cyanobacteria are often the microbes that are inadvertently wrapping microbial slivers of organic matter up in soil particles, or at least they're really good ones, the goofballs. But this is also why they are considered great for carbon sequestration. If you have ample quantities of these microbes in your soil, they do a great job of storing organic matter in the soil in those aggregates, thus sequestering it for some amount of time. This is also why they have been used in soil restoration projects. They are great at colonizing soil and then re-energizing it. In fact, remember our episode about sand stabilization with the straw grids, that an episode that I really enjoyed doing? Well, biofilms made from cyanobacteria have also been identified as a way of restoring soil in arid landscapes and keeping it in place, and other studies have shown that these microbes can be good at retaining soils in wetter climates as well that erode from, like rain. That one sounds familiar to me. Of course, cyanobacteria are also a big range of microbes, and not all are necessarily good. They create the toxic blue-green algae blooms we see in ponds and lakes, and can do similar things in moist soils. Generally, though, when soil nerds are talking about inoculating with cyanobacteria, they are referring to the good blue-green guys. Now, studies on the efficacy of these inoculations to improve soil are relatively positive, a little bit, all over the place, but albeit with many different species used for different purposes. To your winter question, everything slows down in the cold, including Farmer Jesse's, and microbes are really no different. But even still, we know that the soil is surprisingly active in the winter, probably more so than Farmer Jesse's, and even at sub-zero temperatures underneath snow, and no doubt cyanobacteria get in on that action. Nitrogen fixers and decomposers are slowly working their way through the soil, giving growers that nice little spring boost when everything comes to life as the soil warms in the spring. The activity, of course, is heavily dictated by if you have freeze-thaw cycles, if the ground just stays frozen solid, if the ground is covered in snow or cover crops, but microbes are definitely at work decomposing litters and reproducing and consuming, priming the soil for the spring explosion. In some ways, microbes can take advantage of this time to decompose because they are not competing as much with plants for the nitrogen that they need to do that work. Anyway, I don't do a lot of microbial inoculants. I actually don't really do any, but preferring to instead rely on locally made compost. But under the right guidance, and especially in degraded land situations, I could see some benefits to adding cyanobacteria. So yeah, I hope I did the job for you there, Bill. Thanks for the fun question, and we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we will take some time to talk about what time telling did to time. That will make sense. In time. Nailed it. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants Nutrients to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. All right, back to the show. So the first podcast that I ever listened to, fun fact, was the Stuff You Should Know podcast. I used to listen to it all the time, and then I just kind of forgot about it. No reason really, except that I was living off grid and didn't really have access to podcasts for a long time, or at least not consistent access. So it sort of fell off my radar. But then the other day, it popped back up in my head, and I have sort of been binging it because it's just as good, probably better than it was nearly, almost 20 years ago when I first started listening. Anyway, I think they do great work. Highly recommend the data centers episode of recent. That was a really good one. But this week they posted an episode about the history of telling time, and it's super fascinating stuff. A long time before the Swatch, remember those? There were, for instance, these boxes that people would put incense in and burn it, and you would know what time of day it was, or that the hour had passed by what you could smell. Fascinating tidbits like that. But anyway, in it, they also discussed Lewis Mumford's take on how the synchronizing of time changed humanity. Essentially, without getting too deep into the history of the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of the monasteries, what happened was that these monasteries were told to ring the bell 7 times every 24 hours, a sort of call to prayer. And this had an interesting effect on humanity because what was once a much more fluid thing, time, now had boundaries and exactness. Mumford writes, quote, "So one is not straining the facts when one suggests that the monasteries, at the time there were 40,000 under the Benedictine rule, helped to give human enterprise the regular collective beat and rhythm of the machine. For the clock is not merely a means of keeping track of the hours, but of synchronizing the actions of men." End quote. Imagine this in this period before clocks, what life would have been like. You, commoner agrarian, would have lived by the rhythms of the day, of the season, rising with the sun, eating with your hunger, harvesting with the ripeness, delivering when ready. At that time, there would have been plenty of stresses, no doubt about that, but there would have not been the stress of deadlines, at least not in the same way as a deadline would be now. It would have been something like by this evening and not at 8 p.m. or whenever it's ready and not on my desk by noon. In a way, there was a fundamental shift in power and control when we started keeping time. The first great colonization, great as in scale, not in affection, was when commoners were kicked off their land and then allowed to come back and be labor or rent on it, or forced to. Keeping time may have been the second great colonization, the cherry on top, as it were, stripping the freedom of natural rhythms from common people, adding deadlines, generating a new stress, especially when mechanical clocks came around and the clocks were significantly more reliable. I'm going to quote Mumford here one more time because it's so well written. This is from his book, Technics and Civilizations. Quote, "The clouds that could paralyze the sundial, the freezing that could stop the water clock on a winter night were no longer obstacles to timekeeping. Summer or winter or day or night, one was aware of the measured clank of the clock. The instrument presently spread outside the monastery, and the regular striking of the bells brought a new regularity into the life of the workman and the merchant. The bells of the clock tower almost defined urban existence. Timekeeping passed into time serving and time accounting and time rationing. As this took place, eternity ceased gradually to serve as the measure and focus of human actions." End quote, and boom. Eternity ceased gradually to serve as the measure and focus of human actions. That is amazing. What an amazing final sentence in that graph. Anyway, I think it's easy to over-romanticize other epochs, but I also think it's easy to underappreciate them, under-romanticize them, to overlook some of what has been lost in pursuit of quote-unquote progress. There have been a lot of difficult things about the time before timekeeping, the time of shared land, the time of healthy biodiverse wetlands, but also a time of great war and doubt and all those things. No doubt about that. But there are also a lot of difficult things about today too. And I'm not going to say, get rid of clocks, but if it's going to be difficult either way, it may as well be abundant, shared, and, done our own time. Anyway, I look forward to your thoughts on time, or I just look forward to your thoughts in general, and you all having a great weekend, especially you, my Albion, just, not so much you, my snowstorm. Anywho, don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. She'd love to hear from you. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and also my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a cup of tea or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. You can actually get the tea at no-tillgrowers.com. Not yet. Probably not ever, but you can support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of January, fun, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Patrick Weaver and Dwight Yoder, our newest sunlighter. Shouts to you all for keeping our stories going every week, which is important because Gary, our retired special forces / fisherman, has just found like a dam siphoning off his precious creek water. A giant pipe leads from the dam to a tall white building. And if you think, oh, Jesse is just going to like make some, like this about data centers and a parable about water usage or whatever, you, like Gary, are wrong. This was something even Gary couldn't have imagined. Gary, considering just blowing up the dam and returning to his fishing for the day and then dealing with the consequences later, decided instead to tiptoe slowly over to the large white building and climbed up a ladder to the top quietly, and was surprised to find out that it was completely open. This wasn't a building. This was a tank full of water, maybe like a half acre or so in total space. And then a shadow moved in the water, a very large shadow. Suddenly he saw it, and it was absolutely distinctly, he knew exactly what it was. Long neck and all, Nessie of all creatures had been found. Where is she? Why is she there? What? How? Well, that is for perhaps another story, another week. Maybe next week. We'll see. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching and/or listening. Bye.